Do you believe you were born the day you arrived in this world, and that one day everything will simply come to an end? Well, get ready for an idea that might turn your mind upside down. You were never born, and you will never die. Does that sound absurd? Perhaps, but the truth is, there's something far greater behind what we call life. What we're about to explore challenges everything you've been taught to believe about your identity, time, and even the separation between you and the universe. Many people spend their entire lives trapped in limiting concepts, enslaved by an ego that convinces them to believe in beginnings and endings, in fear and loss. But what if I told you that all of this is just an illusion? That behind the self you think you are, there exists an eternal, untouchable, and limitless consciousness. You're about to discover how birth and death are just pieces of a much larger puzzle. And the best part, this knowledge has the power to free you from all anxiety, fear, and suffering. But a word of warning, this journey is not for the faint of heart. It requires you to let go of comfortable certainties and look at reality with entirely new eyes. Are you ready to question everything you think you know? Then follow me, and by the end of this video, you won't be the same. When you look at yourself, what do you see? Perhaps a name, a story, an identity filled with achievements and failures. But what if I told you that this self is nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion? The self is like a mask, shaped by the ego and sustained by the idea of separation. Think about it. When you were a child, your sense of identity was simple, almost non-existent. Over time, layers of thoughts and emotions created a figure you now call me. Yet behind these layers lies something much deeper, a consciousness that is not bound by time or space. This illusion of the self is not something to fear, but to explore. Imagine yourself as an actor in a play where the role changes, but the one behind the performance remains the same. That's the essence of the illusion, believing we are the character when, in reality, we are the stage where everything happens. Try this for a moment. Ask yourself who is behind the thoughts you're having right now. There's no clear answer, is there? That's the beginning of discovery. As you peel back this layer, you begin to see that suffering is intrinsically tied to this illusory identity. Every worry, every fear stems from the belief that you are something separate from the whole. But what if this were just a dream? Imagine a river believing it's not part of the ocean. It still flows to the same destination, even without realizing its interconnectedness. This raises the question, who would you be if you let go of the idea of the self? If you could remember the exact moment of your birth, what would you see? A rupture from nothing to everything, or simply the continuity of something that was always there? The truth is that consciousness has no beginning or end. It transcends the concept of time that the self clings to so desperately. Think about it. When you dream, there are moments when you seem to exist outside the bounds of time and space. This same timelessness is the nature of your true essence. We are not prisoners of birth or death. We are the vast ocean where the waves of life simply dance for a moment. Understanding the timelessness of consciousness challenges the idea that all we are is confined to the body and mind. These are merely instruments we use to experience the world, but they are not who we truly are. Imagine being in a dark room for a long time, believing that limited space defines your existence. Suddenly, a window opens, revealing an infinite sky. That window is the perception of eternal consciousness, something that was never born and therefore can never die. How can we access this truth? The practice begins with observation. Allow yourself to simply be present, breathing, and feeling the moment without labels. When you stop identifying with the thoughts that arise, you discover a silent, constant space. This space has no urgency, no age, no limits. It's like a blue sky behind passing clouds. And then you begin to ask yourself, if I'm not just this limited form, what am I really? The ego is like that friend who tries to protect you but ends up putting you in difficult situations. It's a mental construct, a tool created to navigate the physical world, but over time, it has come to dominate your perception. The ego creates the sense of separation, me versus the world. While it seems like an ally, it's also the source of much suffering. After all, the ego lives in constant fear of losing what it has or not being enough. But the ego isn't the villain of the story. It's more like a scared child trying to get your attention. It needs to be observed, not fought. Imagine yourself in a room full of mirrors. Each reflection looks different, but all are the same light reflected. The ego is one of these reflections, temporary and illusory. It plays a role in offering experiences, but it cannot define your true essence. When you begin to see the ego as something separate from who you really are, an immense freedom emerges. How can you do this in practice? Whenever an intense thought or emotion arises, ask yourself, who is experiencing this? This simple question breaks the automatic identification with the ego and reminds you that you are the consciousness behind everything. It's like stepping out of a movie you were fully immersed in and realizing you're just the spectator. By observing the ego with curiosity and compassion, you discover something even deeper about your nature. Have you ever stopped to observe your thoughts as if you were watching clouds in the sky? Thoughts appear out of nowhere, dance in your mind for a moment and eventually disappear. The problem is that we rarely let them go. Instead, we cling to them, identify with them, and turn them into stories. Emotions follow a similar pattern. They come like waves, but we treat them as permanent storms. What if you could simply observe without judgment and let them pass? The practice of observation begins with presence. When you feel anger or sadness, ask yourself, where does this come from? Is it mine, or is it just something passing through me? This simple question brings clarity. Imagine a leaf floating in a river. You are not the leaf or the current. You are the entire river, allowing everything to flow. Similarly, your thoughts and emotions are temporary visitors in an infinite consciousness. To apply this, set aside a moment daily to sit in silence. Don't try to stop your thoughts. Just observe them, like listening to waves breaking on the shore. You'll notice that when you don't try to control them, they lose the power to control you. In this space of observation, immense freedom arises, a direct connection to something beyond the self. And then you start to wonder, if I can observe all this, who is the observer? Imagine the vast ocean, infinite, deep, and serene at its core. Now picture a wave forming on the surface, strong and full of energy. For a moment, the wave seems like something separate, an entity of its own. But upon closer observation, we see that it was never anything other than the ocean. This is the perfect metaphor for understanding our existence. The self, with all its worries, thoughts, and emotions, is like that wave, temporary, changeable, yet still part of something much greater. The wave never stops being water. Similarly, you never stop being consciousness. Even in moments of turbulence, when the waves are high, the nature of the ocean remains unchanged. This understanding dissolves the sense of separation and connects us to the interconnectedness of everything. Think about how you feel the impact of other people's actions or nature around you. It's no coincidence. It's because we are all part of one ocean. This realization transforms how you see the world and yourself. To experience this metaphor in your life, observe what happens when you identify less with the self and more with the whole. When you act with the awareness that you are not just the wave, but also the ocean, your worries start to lose their strength. Remember, waves come and go, but the ocean remains. And it's precisely in that constancy that you find true freedom of being. True freedom isn't something you find outside yourself, but an internal realization that you are already free. When you understand that the self is just a construct of the ego, something magical happens. Fear disappears. Fear of loss, rejection, even death. All of this loses its weight when you realize that consciousness, your essence, cannot be touched by any of it. It's like waking up from a turbulent dream and realizing you were never in real danger. This liberation isn't a theoretical idea. It's something you can experience in the present moment. Try it right now. Close your eyes and feel your breath. Notice the space between one inhale and the next exhale. In that space, there are no thoughts, only presence. That presence is what you are, beyond the body, beyond the ego, beyond any idea of self. When you return to this state, even if just for a few seconds, you feel a deep relief, as if a massive weight has been lifted. And this realization doesn't just transform how you see yourself, but also how you interact with the world. When you realize that you are the ocean and not just the wave, compassion arises naturally. You begin to see others not as separate from you, but as parts of the same consciousness. And that, my friend, is not the end of a journey, but the beginning of something even deeper. After all, how will you fully live this newly discovered freedom? Theory is important, but true transformation happens through practice. A simple exercise to experience the timelessness of consciousness is observing your breath. Find a quiet place, close your eyes, and just feel the air entering and leaving your body. Don't try to control it. Just observe. As you do this, you'll notice that breathing happens on its own, effortlessly, like the natural flow of waves in the ocean. In that moment, you are beyond time, connected to the now, where everything truly happens. Another powerful exercise is the practice of questioning your thoughts. When a thought arises, ask yourself, is this true, or is it just an interpretation by the ego? This simple act of questioning creates a space between you and the thought, allowing it to lose the control it once had. It's like watching a storm from inside a safe house, knowing you are not the storm, but the one observing it. This exercise can be done at any moment of the day, bringing more clarity and presence. Finally, try the practice of I am. Reflect on this phrase without adding anything else. I am. Don't say, I am this or I am that. Just stay with I am and feel the space this affirmation creates. It's a gateway to the realization that you are not the form, but the consciousness that perceives the form. These practices done consistently not only transform your perception, but also reveal a completely new world within you. Now that you've discovered that consciousness is eternal and limitless, that the ego is just a fleeting illusion, and that the self you believe you are is like a wave on the vast ocean of existence, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you continue living bound by the same stories the ego tells? Or will you start observing your thoughts and emotions with the clarity of someone who knows they are not limited by them? This choice is in your hands, and it can completely transform your life experience. So I ask you, how much longer will you let fear and suffering call the shots? How much longer will you ignore the freedom that is available to you right now? Start today. Set aside a few minutes to observe your breath, question the thoughts that arise, and above all, remember that you are more than the body, more than the mind, more than any idea of self. Small changes can open doors to a world you never imagined existed, and if this resonated with you, don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue exploring these ideas and practices. Together, let's dive even deeper into this ocean of consciousness and liberation. And tell me, what did you feel when you heard this? I'm curious to know. Comment below, and let's keep this conversation going.